Welcome. In this video, we will be discussing the explain function found in the chart tool that is part of the Tools for Traders Standard Edition and the Tools for Traders Ultimate Edition from S&D Software. So let's start by defining what the explain function is. The explain function is a mechanism that allows the user to see and understand how the chart tool processed a block of candles looking for supplier demand bands. It is typically used when the user sees a pattern on a chart that they think should have been turned into a supplier demand band, but the chart tool declined to do so. By using the explain function, the user can see how the chart tool processed the pattern in question and exactly why the chart tool rejected that pattern. As part of the explanation, the user will get to see all of the rules used by the chart tool when processing each candle during its search for a supplier demand band. For each rule, the user will be able to see the name of the rule along with a brief description of the rule, if the rule is currently active or not, the setting that controls the rule, if there is one, exactly what the rule is looking for, if the candle being examined met the requirements of the rule, and ultimately, if a band was found or not. If a band was found, the user will be able to see if the band was accepted by the chart tool. There are various reasons why a band may not be accepted, such as if the band overlaps a prior existing band. Normally, overlapping bands are not allowed, as one would be considered a retest of the other, in which case the overlapping band would not be accepted and would not be added to the chart. However, if the user so desires, the chart tool can be configured to allow overlapping bands. Now, the use of the explain function requires some setup. The chart tool needs to know what block of candles we wish an explanation for. The block of candles requiring an explanation is designated using the candle number of the last candle in the block. Now, the way this works is the last candle in the block will be assumed to be a leg out for a pattern that could result in a supply or demand band, unless follow-through candles are in use. And that's a feature found only in the Ultimate Edition of the tool. If follow-through candles are in use, then the last candle in the block is assumed to be the last follow-through candle, and the chart tool will actually work backwards to find the actual candle to use as the leg out for a potential pattern. But in either case, once the leg out candle has been identified, the chart tool will work backwards from there, trying to build an acceptable pattern that can be turned into a supplier demand band. So the question now is, how do we get the candle number for the last candle in the block of candles that we want an explanation for? Well, to do that, we're going to have to use the SDSI candle number indicator, which is also included in the Tools for Traders package. As the name implies, this indicator exposes the internal candle number for each candle on the chart and makes it accessible to the user. So let's look at how to add this indicator to a chart. So here we have a chart of CL. This is the futures contract for oil. And we're looking at this on a daily interval. So to add this indicator to your chart, we'll follow the standard procedure for adding an indicator. So I'm going to right mouse click on the background of the chart, and that will give us the context menu for the chart. And as I move my mouse pointer down, various submenus will pop up. And when I put it over the studies option on the context menu, we get the studies submenu. So I'll move my mouse over the submenu and I'll select add study. And this will bring us to the Add Studies dialog. Now I'm going to want to make sure I'm on the indicator page. And then over here in the selection box, we'll see all of the indicators that TradeStation believes can be applied to the chart that we're looking at. And I'm going to scroll down until I find the SDSI candle number indicator. Now, these are alphabetical, so all of the SDSI tools you have installed should be grouped together. And here we find the candle number indicator. Now over here, it says prompt for editing, and there's a checkbox. We want to make sure that is checked. And this will immediately bring up the customized indicator dialog for the SDSI candle number indicator. And it'll do this before adding it to the chart, so we can play with the settings before it actually gets put onto the chart. So I'm going to click OK. So this came up on the inputs page, and you can see there are no inputs for this indicator. We're going to go down to the scaling page. And up here in this section titled Axis, we want to make sure that Scale On is set to no axis. It should be by default, but occasionally it's not. And if it's not set to no axis, you can use the pull down menu to select that. Now here for subgraph, we want to make sure that this is set to 1, and this is one that you will most likely have to change. So we can use the pull down and we'll select 1. And this is going to make sure that this is put onto the main chart. And we want it to be on the main chart in order for it to function correctly. Now over on scale type, in this section, we would like to see it set to linear. For scale range, we would like to see it set to automatic. And from the pull down here, date range from screen. Now we're going to go to the general page, and we're going to make sure things are set up correctly there. In this first section here, where it says maximum number of bars study will reference, we want to see user defined selected. And in the box here, we would like to see this set to 1. So if it's not, you can go in there and change that. In the next section here, we would like to make sure that this checkbox is empty. It's blank, unchecked. It says update value intrabar tick by tick. If this box is checked, then this indicator will be called on every tick that comes in for a chart. We don't need that. We only need this run once per candle. So leaving that box unchecked will make sure that it will only run once per candle. So once we have this done, we can go click on OK. And what's happened at this point is that a hidden line has been placed across the chart. And if you click on it, you can sometimes actually stumble into it. Doesn't look, there it is, okay? And if you happen to select it like this, just click somewhere else and ignore it. we need to put this line on the chart to get TradeStation to do certain things for us. So the line is completely transparent so that it's invisible, and it's not going to do anything except sit there. But I'm bringing this up because you could accidentally select it. And again, if you do so, you don't want to mess with it. You just click somewhere else. Now that we have added this indicator to our chart, there will be some differences that you should be able to see. If you have the status line configured, colors here aren't the greatest, but hopefully it's visible. You may see that candle number has been added here, SDSI candle number. And in this case here, it's telling us that there's 505 candles on the chart. If you have the crosshair cursors currently selected, you press and hold the left mouse button. You'll notice that in the info pop-up, candle number has been added. And it shows you the candle number of the currently selected candle. And so as we move, select different candles, you can see that change. If we go into the data window, we'll see the candle number is there also. See, right there at the end. So now that we can get the candle number, I'll go in and I'll choose a candle to use as an example here, or a potential block of candles, I should say. Let's go see why we did not get a zone here on this pullback. And so this would be the leg out candle from the look of it. Make this a little thicker so it's easier to see. There we go. And we can see here in the data window that that is candle number 469. So this is going to be the block of candles that we want an explanation for. We now have our candle number 469. And so now I need to go and tell the chart tool that we want an explanation and we want it for this block of candles. So I'll go into the settings. Select chart tool. We'll go into customize indicator. Then I go to the inputs page. And at the bottom of the commonly used settings section, we'll find the settings that control the explain function. There's 4 settings that control the explain function. Explain is the switch that turns it on and off. I'll set that to true. This needs to be in quotes. Our candle number I'm going to put in here, and that needs to be in quotes also. So the leg out candle number setting, it's going to be 469 in quotes for our example here. The next setting, send explanation to file, allows you to direct the explanation to a file if you choose to do so. And if you do send it to a file, then explain base file name allows you to control where the file will be placed and give you control over the first part of the file name. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a few moments. But once we've set explained to true, and we've given it a leg out candle number, an explanation will be generated. So this will go to the default location, which is the easy language print log. So let's talk a bit about how to view our explanation now. And we'll also get into controlling where the explanation goes and the structure of the explanation, and then we'll return to TradeStation to actually see that and look at the explanation we have just generated. So we saw the 4 settings that control the explanation system. We saw explain, which turns it on and off. And then we saw how to specify the leg out candle number, which is the last candle in the block of candles we seek an explanation for. Now, send explanation to file defaults to false. And if that's false, then the explanation goes to the easy language print log. Now, the easy language print log is easy to get to. You can get to that from your TradeStation desktop using the view menu. And if you select the view menu, you'll get a pull down menu. And the last item on the menu will be the easy language print log. Now you should do this from the desktop that contains the chart tool that generated the explanation. That's important. Now, if you want to send your explanation to a file, then you'll set send explanation to file to true. And once you've done that, the explain base file name setting is going to control where the file is created and what it is called. So here we have the default value for the explain base file name. And this consists of 3 basic parts. The first part specifies the storage device where the file is to be created. The second specifies where on that storage device the file should be created. And then the last part controls the first part of the file name. So any explanations you create with this default value for explain base file name will all start with the words explanation for. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. So the first part here is the drive letter. And each storage device in your system is normally going to be assigned a drive letter. We use drive C as the default because that is where the operating system is normally installed. If you want to send the explanation to a different device, then you would need the drive letter for that device, and you could change C here to be whatever drive letter that is. The second part here is the directory path. And this is a list of directories separated by backslashes. Directories are often called folders nowadays. Now, the first backslash over here is taken as a reference to the root of the storage device. Now, as you proceed through the directory path, the different directories in the path are separated by backslashes. And each directory in this list of directories has to reside in the directory before it in the list. So if we look at our example over here, if we were to use this path name, this directory path, our explanation would be created in a directory called SPY in this example. And this directory called SPY has to reside inside of a directory called My Explanations. And the My Explanations directory has to reside inside of a directory called Chart Tools Data. And that is found in the root directory on the storage device. So this essentially gives us a map to where the file is located within the file system. Now, the file name prefix, again, this is going to essentially be the start of the file name. So let's see how the chart tool is going to build a file name. So if we're viewing the chart and we have the symbol ES on that chart, that is the S&P 500 futures contract. And if it's a 15-minute chart, and the last candle of the block of candles that we want an explanation for has a date and time stamp of July 1st at 10:45 a.m., then we're going to get a file name that looks like this. We'll see our file name prefix here. And in this example, it's explanation for. Then we see the symbol appended. We see the interval appended. And then we see a date and time stamp. Now, on the date and time stamp, the first 4 digits here are the year. The next 2 digits are the month. The last 2 digits of the date are the day. For the time, it's going to be 24-hour time. And we're going to have 2 digits for the hour, 2 digits for the minutes, and 2 digits for the seconds. And then the tool will add .txt to the end of it to tell the operating system what kind of a file it is and what kind of programs can be used to view that file. So let's look at another example of this. This time, we're going to be looking at a chart of the SPY. The SPY is the exchange traded fund in the stock market for the S&P 500. This time we're going to be on a 5-minute interval. And the last candle in the block of candles that we're requesting an explanation for has a date and time stamp of 2:10 p.m. on July 1st. So if we use this for our explain base file name setting, you can see we've made some changes to this. This is going to result in the file name we have down here. So we have our file name prefix, which has now been shortened to just explain underscore, and that's here. We see our symbol, which is SPY. We again have our interval. In this case, it's the 5-minute interval. And again, we can see July 1st, 2021, year first, month, day. And then we see the 24-hour time. 14 hours is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we have 10 minutes after 2, no seconds. We have .txt telling the operating system this is a text file. Now, if we come back up here and we look at the directory path, this tells us that this file is going to be created in the stocks subdirectory of My Explanations, which in turn is underneath Chart Tools Data. So this gives us, again, a map starting from the root of the storage device associated with C. And it tells us we're going to go into the Chart Tools Data directory. We're going to look for the My Explanations directory, and then we're going to go inside that. In there, we should find the stocks directory. If we go inside that, then we should find our file. Now, the one thing I'll point out at the moment is If any of these directories do not exist, the tool will not make them. And what will happen instead is that you'll get an error and the tool will stop running until you clear the error, basically by correcting the setting. Now let's go and look at the structure of an explanation. Explanations have a specific structure. They're always going to start with a series of right angle brackets, and then they will end with a series of left angle brackets. If explanations are going to the easy language print log, you can end up with multiple explanations there. And this allows you to quickly and easily identify where the different explanations start and end. If you send an explanation to a file, you will still have these there. Now, following the start of the explanation, there's going to be a couple lines, and these identify the last candle in the block of candles that we've been asked to process. And they do this in a different way than the candle number. So it gives us a way to cross-check what we've been given. So the user can come in, can look at these, match them against the candle that they designated, and make sure that the explanation is starting at the correct location. This can also help them determine if their candle number tool, the SDSI candle number indicator, this can help them determine if that's set up correctly. So if the chart tool is coming up with a different candle than the one that was designated, then they need to check their settings for the SDSI candle number indicator. So after we've confirmed that we're operating on the right candle and the right block of candles, then you'll start to see blocks of text which correspond to the different patterns that the tool is looking for. And the tool always looks for these patterns in the same order. So you'll always see it looking for a drop base drop first. And if it can't find a drop base drop, then it looks for a rally base rally. If it can't find that, it goes on to a rally base drop and eventually a drop base rally. And in this sequence, the first pattern that matches ends the search. So if it turns out that he finds a rally base rally, he'll never bother to look for the rally base drop or the drop base rally. Now, as mentioned earlier, the chart tool works backwards when it's finding patterns. So it's going to start with the leg out. It'll perform some tests on the leg out. And if those tests pass, then it starts working backwards, looking for a base that will work with that leg out. If it finds a base, then it will work backwards, looking for a leg in. And then if it finds everything, then you have a match, and then it will look to turn that pattern into a supplier demand band. So for each pattern, when the chart tool starts looking for that pattern, it's going to identify the candle that it's using as the leg out. And then as it works its way backwards for each candle process that it processes, you'll see all the rules that were applied to that candle. And this will repeat until either it finds a pattern or it determines that it can no longer find the pattern it's looking for. And again, for every rule, you'll see the name and the description of the rule, the setting that controls it, if there is any, the status of the rule, exactly what the rule is looking for, and whether or not the candle passed the requirements of the rule. And again, if you get all the way through all the rules and you actually find a pattern, then the tool will tell you how it turned that pattern into a band. So let's take a look at an example of this. Here we have part of an explanation. This is from the start of the explanation. And we can see in some detail the different sections. So here's our marker showing the start of the explanation. Here we have the information about the starting candle for the block of candles that we're going to process. So this would be the last candle, since we're always working backwards. This would be the last candle in that block. And so this allows us to confirm that the tool is processing the right block of candles. And we can see here that he is starting with the drop base drop pattern. Here we see a rule. This rule is inactive. This rule involves follow-through candles. Again, follow-through candles are something that is exclusive to the Ultimate Edition. And unless those are actually being used, this rule will be inactive. Here we see the leg out that was selected. If there's no follow-through candles being used, then this should match what we have for the last candle in the block of candles we've been given to process. If follow-through candles are in use, then this may be different, because the tool will have to have worked backwards to find the actual leg out. And so here we can see a rule that's being applied to this leg out. This is the candle color rule. And here is the setting that controls it. This rule is active, and it tells us right here exactly what we're looking for. The candle being examined must be red. We're looking for a drop candle because we're looking for a drop base drop pattern. Drop candles are always red. And in this particular case, it failed, which means that the candle was obviously not red, it was green. So at this point here, a fundamental rule was broken, and we could not, as a result, find a drop base drop pattern. So he's going to give up trying to find the drop base drop pattern, and he's going to move on to the next pattern, which is the rally base rally. And so he would continue on with that processing. And again, you'd see this same structure that we're seeing here. The pattern's identified, then you'll have the rules that are being applied. He tells you each time what candle he is applying those rules to. Now, if we look at the end of an explanation, in this particular example, a drop base rally pattern was found. And so he identifies the pattern that was found, and then we can see how he converts that pattern into a band, how he comes up with the proximal line and the distal line. Now, the engine, which does all this, has 6 different ways that it can go and create a band from a pattern. And so here he's identifying which method is in effect at the moment. This is something that is under user control. And then based on that method, he tells you how he is going to determine the proximal and the distal line. And then here you see the actual values that he obtained for the proximal and the distal line of the band. After the band is found, there can be additional rules. For instance, here we have a measured move test, but this test was inactive. And this again is something from the Ultimate edition of the tool. But in the end, the band was accepted, and it was added to the list of active demand bands being tracked by the tool and was placed on the chart. And then here we have our marker for the end of the explanation. So let's go back to TradeStation now and take a look at the explanation we generated earlier. So that explanation should be waiting for us in the easy language print log. And again, to get to that, we're going to use the View menu from the TradeStation desktop. And so if I click on this, I get the pull down here. You can see that the very last item here is the easy language print log. And so when I select this, we're going to get a window across the bottom of our screen. And we can resize this. Just grab the line there, the separator. Then I can click on here and I can scroll up and down and see what we have in here. So here we see the end of an explanation. Let's scroll up to the beginning. There are other things which will appear in the print log, but here's the start of our explanation. And so just like we saw earlier in the slides, here we have our confirmation information. And we can check and make sure that this matches up against what we had for the candle we specified. And we still have that up here in our data window, so we can actually compare that against the data window and make sure those two match. Okay, it looks like they do. So we have an explanation for the block of candles that we actually requested. You can see here that he starts out looking for a drop-based drop pattern. Here we can see the rule for follow-through candles, which is inactive because none are in use here. Again, we see the confirmation of what he's using as a candidate for a leg out. And then as we come in here, we start seeing, again, some of the rules that are being applied to this potential leg out candle. The first rule here is a gap test. That turns out to be inactive. So we pass through that one and we go to the candle color test. And this one fails. We're looking for a red candle and we can see we actually have a green candle. So the tool gives up on trying to find a drop-based drop pattern and it goes to a rally-based rally. And we see again the same structure that we had for the drop-based drop pattern. So we see here the first rule is again for the follow-through candles, and that's inactive. Again, we have our confirmation of which candle we're using as a potential leg out. And then we start seeing the rules for the leg out. And we have a few more rules this time. So we got past a few things. Let's see what we have here. We have the gap test again. That's again inactive. We have the candle color test. This time we're looking for a green candle, and this time it passed. We then went in and we started looking at how much of the candle has to be in the body as opposed to the wicks. And it tells us here that the candle body must be at least 50% of the candle. And our candle passed. So far, our leg out is looking good. Now we get to the strength test. And here it tells us that the required candle strength is expressed as a multiple of the ATR, and it must be at least 1.25. So the candle strength, which is essentially the difference between the high and the low, has to be at least 1.25 times the ATR. And in this case, it failed. And it failed because the strength of the candle that we have marked as the leg out is just shy of 1.2 times the ATR. And we wanted 1.25. And so because of this failure, we could not find a rally-based rally pattern. And so then he's going to go on and he's going to look for the rally-based drop pattern. Of course, here we'll see the same problem we saw when we were looking for a drop-based drop pattern. He'll fail right after the candle color test. And then he's going to try to look for a drop-based rally pattern. And this is going to fail for the same reason the rally-based rally pattern failed. Our leg out candle isn't strong enough. And it failed the test there. So in this case, we couldn't find a matching pattern. So we couldn't find a band. And that is why we did not get a band being generated here on this pullback. Now here, in this case, we had the explanation sent to the easy language print log. Let's actually go and send it to a file this time. So I'm going to go to the C drive in this system, local disk C. And if you've set up your system correctly, you should have a Chart Tools data directory here. If you don't, then you could go and create it at this point. By default, our explanation should go inside of this directory if we use the default specification for the explain base file name. So let's go and turn on sending this to a file and see what we get. So I'll go back into the settings for the chart tool. And again, it's going to be under the commonly used settings section. Here we go, commonly used settings. And here we have send explanation to file. So I will go and set that to true. And we'll leave explain base file name at the default for now. And we can see we got our file here. And the file is called explanation for CL, daily interval, and we have the date and timestamp from our leg out candle. And if we right mouse click on this, we should be able to open this. Notepad should work just fine. And we see here exactly the same thing that we saw in the easy language print log. Now, let's say we want to put our explanation in a slightly different location. I'm going to create an explanations directory here. So I'll create a new folder. This folder will be inside of the Chart Tools data directory. And let's call this explanations. Let's go underneath explanations. And I'll create another directory. I'll call this oil. So I can have all my explanations for oil grouped together, let's say. Now, if I actually come up here and I click on this window showing this string of directories here, you'll see that we actually end up with the drive letter and the path name. So I'm going to do a Control C here. I'm going to cut or copy this to the clipboard. And actually, I should have gone under oil before I did that, because we want our explanation to be inside of the oil folder. So if I repeat this process again here, you can see how oil was now added to the end of this. So again, I'll do a Control C to copy that to the clipboard. That'll make things easier for us. Now I'll go into the settings for the chart tool. I'll go to Edit Studies. We go to the chart tool. Go to Customize. And it's at the bottom of the commonly used settings section. Here we are, explain base file name. So here, I'll put a quote mark. I'll hit Control V to paste. Now I'll add a backslash that will indicate to the chart tool that that's the end of the directory path. And now we're going to put in our file name prefix. And this time I'm just going to call it explain with an underscore after it. And I'll put my closing quote mark. So that's our explain base file name. We look at the parts. We can see here that we have our drive letter. We have our directory path. And then at the end, we have our file name prefix. So our file is going to start with explain underscore. And then it'll have our symbol and interval and everything else appended to it. And that will be in the oil directory, which is found inside of the explanations directory, which is found inside of the chart tools data directory on the root of the C drive. So let's go see what we get. And here we got our explanation. And we can see this time we used the shorter prefix and we got that. But we're always going to have the symbol appended, the interval appended, and then the date and timestamp from the last candle of the block of candles that we're processing. And we're under the oil directory, which is under the explanations directory, which is under the chart tools data directory. So this is our map to find this file. Again, if we look at this, it'll be exactly what we had before. So this completes this video on the explain function. Hopefully this is useful to you. And again, this is found in the chart tool, which is part of the Tools for Traders Standard Edition and the Tools for Traders Ultimate Edition from S&D Software. So thank you very much for watching.